Bank manager throws black CEO's dad's ID on the floor. $5 billion deal ends immediately. Malcolm Carter had never enjoyed visiting banks, not even when he was young and flush with the naive optimism that the world was more decent than it was cruel. Now, at 68, he'd lived long enough to understand that walking into certain rooms with dark skin and a cautious smile meant you had to prove yourself 3 times over before anyone would even pretend to believe you. But he'd agreed to do this for his son. For Darren, the boy who'd grown into a man he was so proud of he could scarcely stand it without tearing up when he talked about him. The boy who was no longer a boy, but a CEO, a man with partners around the world and more zeros on his bank statement than Malcolm could comprehend even after years of trying. Darren had insisted, "Dad, I need you to sign these papers in person so they can verify you. It's just policy on this one transfer. I'd do it myself if I could. I'm sorry. It's stupid. Son, don't apologize for needing your old man. I don't mind going to the bank. I'll take the bus. Have lunch after. Make a day of it. I can send a car." Nonsense. I've got legs. I'll be fine. So here he was, standing in the cold marble lobby of Marwick and Finch Private Bank, the sort of place designed to make you feel small even before you spoke. High ceilings, darkwood glass walls, a chandelier that cost more than the house he'd raised his family in. He tried to smooth the front of his old gray sport coat, tried to make sure the paperwork Darren had couriered to him was in order. He took a breath, stepped up to the reception desk. The young woman there had a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Malcolm cleared his throat, held out the envelope. "I have an appointment to sign some forms. For my son, Darren Carter." Her eyebrows lifted a fraction. Recognition, maybe? Or surprise? He couldn't tell. She took the envelope with fingertips. "One moment, sir." She typed on her computer with brisk, clipped motions. Her gaze flickered back to him once or twice, assessing. He felt the urge to say something, anything, to make her see him as human. "It's a big day for him," he offered, voice soft. "Excuse me. My son, he's closing a deal. Very big. This is just paperwork, but he asked me to come myself." She paused, gave him that tight, professional smile again. "Of course, sir. Please wait here." She disappeared into a side door. Malcolm stood there, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down, listening to the muted hum of conversations behind glass walls. He tried not to fidget. When she returned, she was accompanied by a tall man in a tailored navy suit who wore his hair slicked back so severely it seemed to stretch the skin at his temples. He carried a leather folder. He didn't smile. "Mr. Carter." Malcolm straightened. "Yes, sir. That's me. Follow me, please." They walked in silence down a corridor lined with frosted glass. At the end, a small conference room waited, all chrome and cold efficiency, no warmth in sight. The banker gestured Malcolm in. "Have a seat." Malcolm lowered himself carefully into the chair. His knees popped. He winced. "Old bones," he said, trying to smile. No response. The banker sat opposite, opened the leather folder, and leafed through the papers with crisp, deliberate flicks. "You're here to authorize a transfer?" "Yes, sir. My son asked me to come." "Darren Carter. I know who your son is." The tone was flat, almost dismissive. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Good. That should make this simple. May I see your identification?" Malcolm dug in his coat, fingers brushing lint and old receipts before finding the worn wallet. He pulled out his driver's license, smoothed it with care, and handed it over. The banker took it with 2 fingers, studied it for all of 3 seconds. Then something changed in his eyes. Cold, calculating, almost disdainful. "This is your ID?" "Yes, sir." Well, it's old. It's current. I renewed it last year." The banker turned the license over, held it up to the light, as if expecting it to reveal something ugly. Malcolm felt heat crawl up his neck. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. The banker didn't answer. He dropped the ID on the table, but it bounced off and fell to the floor with a hard plastic clack. Malcolm stared. For a second, neither man moved. Then the banker gave a thin smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You can pick that up." Malcolm's ears rang. He bent, slowly, painfully. Picked it up. His hand shook as he wiped dust from it. He set it carefully back on the table. Didn't meet the man's eyes? "We're going to need further proof of identity," the banker said coolly. I don't understand." "Bank policy. 4. Certain transfers. We require more robust documentation. My son sent the paperwork." "I'm aware. But this is our process." Malcolm felt his chest tighten. "Sir, please. I promised him I'd get this done today. He's counting on me. It's not my problem if you can't satisfy our requirements." Malcolm blinked. His eyes burned. "Is this because of me?" The banker raised an eyebrow. "Because of what?" "Because I don't look the part." Silence. Chill. The banker closed the folder with a crisp snap. "If you're unable to provide acceptable identification, Mr. Carter, there's nothing further to discuss. You can see yourself out." Malcolm sat there for one long, echoing moment. His pulse roared in his ears. He pushed himself to his feet. Slow. Deliberate. His fingers trembled as he gathered the envelope. He pressed his lips together to keep them from shaking. He walked out without another word. The banker watched him go. Expression blank. Unmoved. Outside, the lobby felt colder. Quieter. Malcolm's legs felt unsteady. He paused by the doors. Looked down at the ID in his shaking hand. Swallowed. He blinked back tears. Took a slow, ragged breath. And pulled out his phone. Dialed his son. Waited for him to pick up. "Dad? Everything okay?" Malcolm's voice cracked. "Son, we've got a problem." Darren Carter answered on the second ring, though he hadn't really been expecting a call right then. He'd been in the middle of a planning session with his executive team, reviewing the final revisions on the merger documents that would, if all went well, make them one of the most powerful infrastructure firms on the continent. He had been tired, yes, deadly tired after months of negotiations, endless legal reviews, calls with foreign partners at 3 a.m. But he'd also been buzzing, thrumming with the bright, cold electricity of, "We're going to do this." The deal was days from signing. $5 billion. Jobs secured for thousands. Legacy level. His father was going to be there for the closing dinner. They joked about it the night before. And now his phone was vibrating in his hand with Dad on the caller ID. He answered lightly at first, voice warm. "Dad? Everything okay? You at the bank?" But even before Malcolm spoke, he heard it. The ragged breathing. The hesitation. "Son." Just that one word. Broken. Darren went still. Utterly, horribly still. "Dad. Tell me. What happened?" He heard the tremor in his father's exhale like an old accordion with a torn bellows. "They wouldn't help me." "What do you mean, Dash?" "I gave them the papers you sent. My ID. But the man he wouldn't look at me properly. Son, he threw my ID on the floor." Silence pooled between them. Deep. Viscous. "He did what, Dash?" Darren's voice was soft. "Dangerously so." He heard his father's voice crack. "He told me to pick it up. Like I was some beggar asking for charity. Said my ID wasn't good enough." Darren's fingers tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. He closed his eyes. Forced himself to breathe. "Dad, are you still there now?" "No. I had to leave. Couldn't stay. I'm sorry. I left." God. He could see it in his mind too clearly. His father, dignified and quiet, in that old gray coat he refused to replace. Stooping painfully to pick up his ID off the marble floor while some smirking junior banker sat back and let him. "Dad, listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. I tried. I really tried, Darren. I did exactly what you said. But he just looked at me like I wasn't anyone. You didn't do anything wrong. I think I embarrassed you. Don't say that. You needed me to do one simple thing and Dad, stop. He had to close his eyes tight against the sudden hot prick of tears. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. This is not on you. His father's breathing rattled. I don't want to mess up your big deal, son. Don't you dare say that. Don't you even think it. Malcolm went quiet again. Darren could hear people shifting around his conference room. His VP of Finance watching him with worried eyes. Dad, I'm going to take care of this. Okay. It's okay. You don't have to. Just forget it. Please. I will never forget it. Malcolm exhaled. Sounded so tired. I think I'm gonna go home now, son. Do you need me to send someone to get you? No. I'll take the bus. Dad, don't worry about me. You have your big day. I don't want to make it worse. Darren's voice was shredded when he finally answered. It's not a big day anymore, Dad. Don't say that. I love you. Go home. Rest. I'll call you in a little while. Malcolm sniffed. I love you too, son. Go home. He ended the call before he could start screaming. The room was silent behind him. Every eye in the glass conference room was on him. Darren set his phone on the table, pressed his palms flat beside it, stared at the shiny wood surface, seeing nothing. Finally he looked up, met their eyes. Everyone out, he said quietly. No one moved. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Now. Chairs scraped back. People shuffled out. Hushed. Eyes flicking between each other. He waited until the door clicked shut. Then he closed his eyes. Exhaled slowly. Counted to 10 in his head. It didn't help. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Brenda. His assistant's voice crackled through. Yes, Mr. Carter. Get me the regional VP for Marwick and Finch on the line immediately. Personal line. Right away. He hung up, stared at the city skyline outside the window. Steel and glass and money. All the illusions of respectability. His fingers drummed once on the table. Stopped. He was going to burn it all down if he had to. He remembered his father's voice, quivering with old pain he thought he'd beaten out of himself decades ago. He told me to pick it up. Like I was nobody. Nobody. No, not today. Not ever again. Minutes later, his assistant's voice buzzed back in. Mr. Carter? I have the VP. He's waiting. Put him through. He heard the line click. A new voice. All syrupy charm and false warmth. Darren. My friend. Always a pleasure. Brenda said it was urgent. Darren didn't bother with greetings. Didn't bother with pretense. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Sure? Of course. One of your branch managers just humiliated my father. Made him pick up his own ID off the floor. Refused service. Said he didn't look the part. Silence. I want his name. I want him gone. Today. Darren, listen, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. I don't pay people to disrespect my family. Please. Let me look into it, You have 30 minutes to call me back with a name and confirmation of termination. Or this deal is over. My lawyers will be withdrawing every dollar. Darren. Be reasonable. You want $5 billion on your books next quarter? Yes. 30 minutes. He ended the call. Then he stood, fists at his sides, chest heaving. His reflection in the glass was calm. But his blood was on fire. This was not how the world was supposed to work. And if he had anything to say about it today, it wasn't going to. The call didn't even take the full 30 minutes. It took 18. Darren had timed it, pacing the perimeter of his office like a panther in too small a cage. Jaw tight enough to ache, mind running cold calculations while his heart pounded fury with every beat. He could see the city skyline outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows, towers of gleaming glass that liked to pretend they were monuments to fairness and merit but had always been, in truth, walls that kept the wrong people out. When the phone on his desk rang again, he snatched it up before the first ring even finished. Carter. It was the VP. Voice unsteady this time. All the smooth confidence scraped raw. Darren. Look, I want you to know we take this very seriously. I've already spoken to the branch. Name. Excuse me. The manager. The one who made my father pick his ID off the floor. Give me his name. Stephen Merritt. Is he still employed? A long, ugly pause. We're in the process. Wrong answer. Listen, please. Darren slammed his palm onto the desk so hard the phone rattled. You have one chance to tell me he's fired. Not reprimanded. Not retrained. Not spoken to. Fired. Today. Dash. He heard the man on the other end swallow. Effective immediately. He's terminated. Darren closed his eyes. For a moment, it didn't make him feel better at all. Send my father an apology. Of course. Not an email. A letter. Signed. With your name on it. Yes. Absolutely. And a call. We will. Today. Yes. Darren was silent, breathing like he'd run 5 miles. Is there anything else? The VP tried, voice high and brittle. Yes. Of course. Pull my family's accounts from your bank. Excuse me? Close them. Transfer every dollar to Citibank. I'll sign whatever you send. I don't want 1 cent with you. The VP sounded like he'd been slapped. Darren, please, let's not be hasty. This was one employee. Your systems let him think it was fine. You don't get my father's money. Or mine. Or my company's. Your company, Darren, please? That's billions. Yes. We can't lose this deal. You just did. And he hung up. He let the silence wash over him, heavy and absolute. He placed the receiver back in its cradle with slow, deliberate care, his fingers shaking despite his best efforts. He stared at his reflection in the glass. A man in an expensive suit, dark-skinned, sharp-eyed, wealthy beyond most people's comprehension. And still someone who had to remind the world his father wasn't disposable. He felt something in his chest crack, not with rage this time, but with grief. His assistant, Brenda, knocked and cracked the door. Mr. Carter? Everything all right? He didn't turn. No. Is there anything I can do? He was quiet. Finally, he nodded once. Yes. Cancel the rest of my meetings today. And get me a car. I'm going to see my father. Right away. He finally sat, pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes until the world went red and black. He would fix it. He would always fix it. Because that's what a son did. Because he was the man his father had raised. Because no one was going to make Malcolm Carter feel small if Darren had breath left in his body. Meanwhile, across town, Malcolm sat in his small, tidy living room, the TV flickering with muted daytime news no one was watching. His ID sat on the table beside him, so carefully cleaned you'd think he was polishing silver for a dinner party. He held it in one trembling hand, thumb rubbing over the letters. He jumped when the landline rang, stared at it like it was a snake. He picked up slowly. Hello? It was a voice he didn't know. Fussy. Clipped. Too smooth. Mr. Carter? This is Marwick and Finch. I'm calling to apologize on behalf of our bank. Malcolm didn't speak. Just listened. The man rattled on. Company policy. Unacceptable behavior. Not reflective of their values. The words slid off Malcolm's ears like oil on water. He closed his eyes. We'd also like to assure you that the employee in question has been terminated immediately. Silence. Malcolm swallowed. Sir? Did you hear me? Malcolm cleared his throat. Yes. I heard you. Again, we're so sorry. Malcolm hung up without another word. He set the phone down carefully, looked at his ID again, pressed his thumb to it, leaving a smudge. He didn't cry, but he shook. Far away in an office tower, Darren sat in silence. He didn't feel victorious. He felt gutted, but he'd done what he could. He'd do more tomorrow. He picked up his phone, dialed his father. Pushpin text with preview for a YouTube caption. A wealthy black CEO discovers his father was humiliated at a bank, his ID thrown on the floor by an arrogant manager. Furious, he calls the bank VP and demands justice, even if it costs them $5 billion deal. Their raw, emotional confrontation changes everything. When Malcolm picked up this time, Darren's voice was softer. Warren. Real. Dad. I'm coming over. Malcolm let out a breath that sounded like it carried 50 years of worry. Okay, son. I'll put the kettle on. And for the first time that day, neither of them felt quite so alone. Darren let himself out of the car before it had even fully stopped, the door slamming behind him with a force that made the driver flinch. He didn't wait for the door to be held, didn't pause to adjust the immaculate knot of his tie that felt too tight suddenly like a noose. He strode up the cracked cement walk toward the small brick house where he'd grown up, the same place his father had scraped together mortgage payments for decades. A house that smelled of floor polish and old books and the lemon oil Malcolm insisted on using on the coffee table every Saturday morning. He didn't bother knocking. He never did. He opened the door and called softly, but urgently. Dad? The answer came from the small living room off the narrow hall. In here, son. Darren stepped inside, let the door shut behind him with a dull thud, as if even the old hinges knew this wasn't a day for slamming. He found his father in his chair by the window, the ancient floral upholstery faded to muted pastels, the sunlight slanting across Malcolm's face in a way that showed every line, every weary shadow under his eyes. The old man held a mug of tea in one big, knotted hand. The other hand was empty. No book, no crossword, just resting on the armrest, fingers tapping absently like he couldn't stand still even when sitting. There was a silence as they regarded each other. Not hostile, not cold, just heavy. Finally, Darren exhaled. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to one knee in front of his father's chair. Dad, I'm sorry. Malcolm looked startled. He frowned. Now why on earth would you be sorry? Darren shook his head, pressing the heel of his hand to his eyes. Because I asked you to go. Because I didn't realize what they'd do, how they treat you. Malcolm's mouth worked soundlessly for a second. He set the tea down with a careful click on the coaster. Darren, look at me. Darren dropped his hand. His eyes were wet. This wasn't your fault, Malcolm said. His voice was softer than Darren remembered hearing in years. This wasn't on you. This was them. That boy in the suit who thought he was better than me because of the color of my skin and the age on my face and the scuffs on my shoes. That wasn't you. Darren clenched his teeth so hard his jaw clicked. I should have known. How? Because I've seen it. His voice broke. He swallowed hard. Because I've lived it. Because I spent my 20s being told I was the exception, the well-spoken one, the one who could sit at the table if I didn't make them uncomfortable. And I thought, God help me, I thought I'd made it better for you. Malcolm went quiet. He sighed and settled back in the chair, the old springs creaking in protest. Son, listen to me. You can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. You can't make them see what they refuse to look at. You can only keep going. Darren shook his head. I didn't just keep going. I made them pay. Malcolm's eyebrows rose. What did you do? Darren sat back on his heels, voice low and dangerous. I called the VP. Told him what happened. Gave him 30 minutes to fire that man or I'd kill the deal. $5 billion, Dad. I meant it. Malcolm was silent for a long moment. Then he let out a slow, rusty laugh that sounded like it hadn't been used in years. $5 billion, huh? Yeah. Well, that'll teach them to mind their manners. Darren's mouth twitched despite himself, but there was no humor in his eyes. It shouldn't take that. Malcolm sobered. No, it shouldn't. They sat in the quiet for another minute, the house ticking around them with old pipes and settling beams. Finally, Darren spoke again, voice husky. I'm sorry they made you feel small. Malcolm shook his head slowly. I didn't feel small. You don't have to spare me. I felt angry, son. I felt tired. But I didn't feel small. Because I know who I am. I know what I built. I know what I raised. He reached out, laid a heavy hand on Darren's shoulder. I know the man you became. Darren's eyes flooded. He looked down, blinking furiously. Dad. Malcolm squeezed once, then let go. Let them have their marble floors and their chandeliers. They can keep M. I'll keep my dignity. Even if it means walking out with my ID in my pocket instead of in their fancy envelope. Darren finally let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. He wiped at his face. You want some tea? Malcolm asked gently. Yeah, I do. Malcolm levered himself out of the chair with a grunt, wincing as his knees protested. Go get us some cups then. Don't just sit there like you're 6 years old waiting to be served. Yes, sir, Darren said softly, smiling despite everything. They moved around the cramped little kitchen with the quiet choreography of people who'd lived together once. Malcolm filled the kettle, humming tunelessly. Darren found 2 chipped mugs, set them on the counter. They didn't talk about the bank anymore. They didn't need to. It wasn't fixed. It wasn't better. But it was theirs. And for the moment, that was enough. Darren didn't go back to the office that day. He stayed at his father's house well into the evening, long after the weak autumn sun had drained from the small, smudged windows, leaving the rooms bathed in the soft orange glow of table lamps and the rattling old furnace that always sounded like it was about to die. They talked about everything but the bank. Sports. Books. Old family stories so worn they were practically myths. Malcolm asked after his granddaughter in Atlanta even though he'd seen her over video chat last weekend. Darren offered to fix the squeaky cabinet door that had driven them both crazy since the late 90s. They didn't say sorry again. They didn't have to. Around 8, Darren stood slowly, stretching joints stiff from hours in the battered armchair. I should let you rest, Dad. Malcolm snorted, one eyebrow raised. Rest from what? Listening to you complain. Darren cracked a smile. You know, most people are polite to the guy threatening to buy them a new house. Malcolm's eyes softened. This is my house, son. I don't need new. I need it to be mine. Darren went quiet. Nodded once. Okay. He crossed the room in 2 strides and wrapped his father in a hug that was firm, deliberate, a promise in itself. Malcolm's big hand patted his back once. Twice. Drive safe. Don't speed. And don't you dare text me while you're behind the wheel. Yes, sir, Darren muttered, voice suspiciously husky. Outside, the night was cold enough to make him gasp as he exhaled, vapor clouding in front of him like a dragon's breath. He stood there a minute longer than he needed to, the door shut behind him, the porch light spilling pale yellow on the cracked steps. He pulled out his phone. Back at his apartment downtown, he worked for hours. Not on the deal. Not on spreadsheets or legal disclaimers or cost analysis. But on a letter. It was open on his laptop in the dark, the only light in the room, the screen's glow reflecting off the glass table. To the board of directors, Marwick and Finch Bank, I am withdrawing my company's offer to partner on the municipal infrastructure financing project, effective immediately. I do not take this decision lightly. This project would have generated more than $5 billion in investment over the next decade. However, I will not continue any business with an institution that humiliates its customers for the crime of being black, elderly, or insufficiently polished to fit your aesthetic. Your branch manager made my father pick his ID up off the floor after dropping it in contempt. That man no longer works for you, but he was your employee long enough to think he could behave like that. I will not forget. And neither will the communities you claim to serve. We will find other partners for this deal. Ones who don't treat our elders like they are disposable. Sincerely, Darren Carter, CEO, Carter Development Group. He sat back. Reread it. Didn't change a word. He hit send. The fallout was immediate. His phone buzzed until he turned it off entirely. News picked it up before dawn. Black CEO ends $5 billion bank deal over father's mistreatment. Marwick and Finch faces backlash for discrimination. Hashtag ID on the floor trends worldwide. Requests for interviews flooded in. He declined them all. He issued only one statement. I didn't do this for press. I did it for my father. I did it because I was tired of asking politely for basic respect. He visited his father the next weekend. This time, he brought groceries, a new belt Malcolm wouldn't admit he needed, and a stubborn refusal to let the conversation wander back to the bank unless his father wanted it to. Malcolm let him in without a word. They unloaded the bags together in the kitchen. When they were done, Malcolm settled into his chair. You really killed that deal? Darren leaned against the counter, arms folded. Yeah, I did. Malcolm shook his head slowly. That's a lot of money, son. It's just money. That's not something you say lightly. I don't. Not anymore. Malcolm looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded. I hope you know I'm proud of you. Darren felt something in his chest crack wide open. He cleared his throat. I know, Dad. You always been a hard man. But you got your mama's sense of right. She'd have raised hell. Malcolm chuckled. She would have marched into that bank with a frying pan. They both laughed at that. Silence fell. Easy. Companionable. Darren crossed the room. Sat on the edge of the old coffee table like he'd done as a kid, back when his feet didn't reach the floor. He reached for his father's hand. Held it. They're not going to forget this, you know, Darren said quietly. Good, Malcolm rumbled. Neither am I. Better still. They sat there in the warm, creaky old house as the wind rattled the windows, holding on to each other, two men from the same bloodline refusing to bow. Because they knew who they were. Because no bank, no suit, no polite smiling bigot was ever going to make them forget it again. And somewhere between the ticking of the clock and the sigh of the wind, something settled in both of them. Not forgiveness, but something that might, one day, become peace.